I've got an interesting story that we don't really talk about too often, which is ice hockey. We talk a lot about sports and mostly about like basketball and soccer and field hockey and cross country, but we never talk about ice hockey. And we have a really big piece this week on the hockey play with high school and how it's all changed. Anyway, so Jason Brisbois did a great piece again, as he usually does on sports. And the K-Pan, the boys hockey, boys varsity hockey, Manchester plays on the Rockport League, which you know that it's the Vikings, and they play out of the O'Malley School. So we've always done that. And this year they started, and we talked about how different it is. But I'm going to maybe go back to the boys, because what I find interesting is the girls ice hockey is happening this year. And that is relatively new. And it's, they are playing with the Marblehead League, which includes Hamilton, Wenham, Swampscott, and Marblehead, those high schools. So they go south and the boys go north. The girls typically play at the Salem State hockey rink, and they have not been able to use the ice there. Everything's changed with COVID on both sides, but what's interesting is that for the boys, they find the lack, they neither one of them can use with COVID. They have to play in masks, they have to do all the things that they're supposed to do with safety and distancing, but they're not allowed to use the locker rooms, which for other sports you might say, okay, but for hockey, my goodness. Yeah. So for ice hockey, the girls said the reason why not having access to the locker room is a problem is that, you know, the logistics of getting things on and off.
Yeah.
The boys coach, though, and Brittany Smith, by the way, is the coach for the girls. And the boys coach, which is Kyle Nelson, he actually said, and I'm actually looking at this right now, he said the problem is coaching time. So much of the culture of his team, and probably other teams as well, they get so much sort of mid-game, you know, or on the fly coaching and sort of, hey, let's do
in
this.
The locker room.
And they do it in the locker room, and they don't have that chance anymore. And that's what they kind of miss, which is interesting. So the season is truncated. It's got a much shorter season for both sides. The boys have gotten off to a hard start. They only have 10 games, and they're 4 games in, and they're 0-for-4. The girls, though, are 3 games in, and they're 1-1-1. So, and they're called the Magicians, I believe. But anyway, so there's 5 players from Manchester on the girls team, which you can imagine with sort of these bigger towns, you know, Swampscott and Marblehead are much bigger. That's pretty good to have 5 of them. And one of them, Lily Frank Kerr, is on the goalie rotation. And the boys have 8 from Manchester. So the boys have, and those 8 boys, they've been playing together for a really long time. I mean, they've been playing since clubs, since they were young. So, you know, there's a shorthand there, where the girls, I would imagine there's not quite as much. And so they have they're at a different place. But anyway, it's all about chemistry. So that was that's the headline of the story.
Yeah, keep skating, Hornets.
It's chemistry lessons. That's the headline of the story. But it's a really great dip into it. And it's nice to visit with ice hockey.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know a couple of those boys on that team. So between Manchester and Rockport. So
hockey, I mean, you know what they say about hockey if you're a parent. Oh.
Yeah. Yes.
A lot of early mornings.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
early as in like 4 a.m.
It has to be a religion, because that's the only way you can manage it.
And the parents, as a result, they're really tight with each other. They've known each other for a really long time, and they're really
yeah.
It's a long leash.
Yeah.
Erika, do you want to talk about the town election nominations? I know that people can get those by mail now.
Yeah, nominations are open. Well, you can go by and pick up. You can arrange for that. But the nomination papers are available, and they're available now. There are, and this is for elected positions, by the way. I always like to delineate that, because what people don't realize is one of the best on-ramps for throwing your hat in the ring is getting involved with an appointed position. And there are many, many, many commissions and committees in Manchester and in Essex, but in Manchester especially, which are appointed. You know, Bike and Ped Committee, the Downtown Improvement Committee, like there's many of them, and they're very important. And so you have to actually get, it's not elected. The Conservation Commission is appointed. Right. So get involved with those as well. But for elected positions, there are 10 open slots for the spring election in Manchester, and there are 11 in Essex. So these, come up, the terms are coming up. I know the Board of Selectmen has one slot. I think Becky Jakes' position is up. So we'll have incumbents for many of these. But there may be some new ones. I know last year, one of the most colorful elections ended up being one where nobody took out nomination papers. Do you remember that for the planning board?
Yeah, right.
And then there was a tight race at the end between Donna First and Gary Gilbert. And it all took place in like 2 weeks. It was crazy. And they were both write-ins. Well, if you plan ahead, you don't need to do that. And that was only because it was at the last minute, there was a necessity. But in this case, they're coming up in both towns. I would check with the town website because they differ. I think maybe in Manchester, you have to get it mailed in. In Essex, I believe you can get it by mail, or you can call up Pam Thorne, the town clerk, and she can arrange for you to pick it up. And then the general deadline to return them with the signatures is March. So you've got plenty of time to get them back. And then the elections in early May on a Monday is Essex, and I think it's very similar in Manchester. As we get closer, we'll be able to talk all about it as people actually take out their nomination papers, and we have some races.
We will be following closely for sure. Yeah.
Erika, do you want to touch upon the postcard series before we go?
Oh yeah, this is kind of one of those things that is just a really good feature. And I encourage people to, I don't do this often, but go to the website, check it out if you like history and if you like local history. We have a series called Postcards Home. We've talked about it before. Remember we talked about, it's our travel series for the paper, but the way we do it is we do it where readers, local people who go on a trip, they do a first person letter home basically with some pictures.
Yeah, some of them are great.
Yeah. So I think we talked about it once because about 6 months ago, we had a great one that was from a couple from Manchester who were trapped in Bonaire because they were taking a sailing trip around the world and they got trapped with COVID before the Panama Canal.
Amazing.
So how many of those do we have? Not a lot. So this time what we have is Christy King, who lives in Beverly Farms, and she happens to also be our digital director, but she wrote an interesting take on Postcards Home. It was a piece about her traveling back in time, basically, and researching her family. Now, she comes from Oregon. She moved here. Her name is King. And she found out through research, especially at the Peabody Essex Museum was especially helpful. Her family goes back 9 generations to the founding of this country. Her great, blah, 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 in the 1800s was a congressman right before Saltonstall. And he spoke in a very well-known speech on the floor of the US Congress in favor of bringing in California as a state in the 1850s, because he was an abolitionist, and it was they didn't have slavery in California, and I felt like that was kind of, sort of something that just is a weird wormhole. So it's a travel piece.
So did she realize that she had these roots on the North Shore before she moved here?
No. And one of the things, I don't know if I can do this, but one of the things here, this is her going to a cemetery on Lowell Street in Peabody, because that used to be Salem. She is at the King Cemetery because it's got all of her family, all the Kings are there. And she went and she took pictures looking at all of these people, including one of whom she had in her family in Oregon. And then I'll stop, I'm sorry. Her family's had 2 portraits, very old portraits of these old 17th century men and 18th century men that nobody was like, and it had a piece of paper on the back. They were both from Massachusetts. One of them is buried there. And her family used to call the portraits the noses because they had such big noses.
That's really funny.
Great
So
stuff.
it's there you go.
Yeah.
We're very serious here at the Cricket. Like we keep it elevated.
Well, I call that really interesting storytelling and genealogy and a mystery. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it was nice. And it's nice to hear a personal story, especially in this time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Up to our noses in Manchester and Essex news. Thanks, Erika.
Thanks, guys.